Hello and Happy New Year, everyone. I'm Amanda Tran and welcome to Self. On this podcast, I have conversations, share ideas and experiences to explore the self with the aim of all of us living happier and healthier lives. On today's episode, I am going to be reflecting on my greatest highlight of 2022, good humans. Before we get into it, I just wanted to quickly mention that this is actually episode 10 of Self. So we are officially into double digits, which is so exciting. Whether this is the first episode you've tuned into, or if you've been listening to the whole show so far, or you've listened to a few episodes here and there, no matter what, I just wanted to say thank you so much. It honestly wouldn't be possible without you. And this podcast was an ambition of mine. And I'm really proud of it. And I feel so privileged to be able to share my own journey and some of these great conversations I've had with people around me with you. And so, thank you for your time and thank you for listening. So, something I like to do at the end of each year is just to take time to reflect on obviously like the past year, right? So, I guess a bit of that is in reflecting on certain milestones and achievements and I guess perhaps looking at things that I thought were impossible at some stage, maybe a bit like this podcast, actually. I think at the start of 2022, I did not think that this was something I would be able to effectively execute. And yet here I am, as I said, 10 episodes in, which is pretty crazy. So I think it's always a great opportunity to identify growth within myself and also, identify and recognize all the great things I have to be grateful for. And I'm not typically someone who sets any New Year's resolutions. So it's not so much about comparing to certain goals or anything that I set out to achieve. But I think something I'm recognizing as I'm just, living and kind of journeying through life is identifying key lessons for me to learn so that I can better show up for myself and for others. And perhaps I haven't dedicated, truthfully, enough time to reflect fully on 2022. It's honestly been a bit of a crazy season for me. But the one thing I really have spent a significant amount of time thinking about is continuing to choose to be surrounded by good humans. I'm sure for a lot of those around me, this is probably a bit of an overused phrase. I really like to call these people, my closer circle, good humans. And I've actively chosen to invest time and energy into these relationships as I've identified who these people are to me. And throughout 2022, as I began to accept myself fully, as I began to set better boundaries for myself and identify green flags in people, my circle began to shift pretty significantly. Maybe, I guess and it shifted because I allowed space for new friendships to enter. And I also deepened many of my other friendships. And just this beautiful thing has happened where some of my circles have interconnected. I've got like my freediver friends and my winter snowboarding friends and kind of these different tribes, and they've come together, which has just been this great amalgamation of good humans. So when I was thinking about this episode, and it's funny because I mentioned it to a couple of my friends. I was like, oh, this episode's going to be an ode to good humans. And they're like, oh, she's going to be talking about us. But it's true. It is. You guys know who you are. When I was thinking about the idea of good humans and thinking about these people who are in my life and who have played a pivotal role, not only in 2022, for some, yeah, they may have only come into my life in 2022, but for many others, they've been there for, nearly 20 years. I wanted to talk about green flags that we identify in people. I think sometimes we recognize red flags, and I joke about it a lot, but it's pretty easy to be like, oh yeah, these are some major red flags you want to ignore. But I wanted to start this year off talking about green flags in people, because I think by identifying that in people around us, we can also better identify them in ourselves. And again, it comes back to showing up better, both for ourselves and for others around us. And yeah, so when I was thinking about what are these green flags to me, what are these things that allowed me to, pick out and invest time into these humans, I think one of the green flags for me is people who choose kindness over niceness. And I was having this conversation with a friend the other day who asked, like, I can't remember actually what the question was. I'm quite forgetful, but asked something about like nice people. And I reflected on that a bit, and I thought, I used to think that being nice was the thing, like, oh yeah, I get along well with nice people and I like to look for nice people. But something that I recognized that I valued was actually people who choose kindness over niceness, because sometimes, and maybe this, to be fair, maybe this is just, it comes down to like the nitty gritty of the word or how we understand and define the word nice. But for me, I think choosing to be kind can sometimes come at a cost of, not necessarily doing the nicest thing. Sometimes kindness is being truthful and being honest, and that might disappoint and hurt someone. And that might not be something that is perceived as nice, but it's a kinder thing for both you and another person. And so I recognize that actually something I value is not someone who chooses perhaps to have this surface level of niceness, the appearance of doing something that might just appear as good on the outset, but actually people who are choosing kind actions and kind words in the times when it might be hard to be kind. Maybe when it's easier to be nice but harder to be kind, that they're able to choose the kind thing. Another green flag for me is people who respect boundaries. And I love seeing people who respect their own boundaries as well as others. And something that's so important that I am inspired by is when I see people who are able to talk about their own boundaries, who talk about how they've set boundaries for themselves and have been able to honor that at the cost of sometimes disappointing others. And I guess perhaps because I'm such a natural people pleaser, many of those around me have shared with me that they also feel the same way. And so, yeah, I think a green flag is being able to see, if like in a lot of my friends who are people pleasers, being able to see like and identify that that's how I am, but I'm going to actively choose to try and set better boundaries for myself. And I think when we are able to respect our own boundaries, we also better respect other people's boundaries. And that's just become quite an important value of mine, because it wasn't something I was able to do before, recognize before. And I think I wasn't able to do it well either as a result, because I couldn't identify and vocalize my own boundaries. It also made it quite difficult for me to respect other people's boundaries, or even recognize when they were trying to set a boundary for themselves. Something else that I see as a major green flag, and that I see in those around me, and I'm so happy that my good humans are like this, are people who celebrate you and your successes. And I am someone who is a very enthusiastic person, and I love getting stoked with my friends, and I love getting excited for what they're excited about, and seeing people's dreams come true, and seeing people achieve things that they set out to achieve. And doesn't have to be a massive milestone. It can, honestly, like, if you tell me that you're going out to try some of the best donuts in town, and you go and you get it and you're pumped, like, I'm excited for you. So no, I mean, that's kind of a ridiculous example, but I think having people who just want to support you and see you thrive and see you succeed is so important. I've been around people before who, when you share something that lights you up inside, and they just want to dim your light. And I haven't had many of those around me, but I did have that in a past relationship, and it just wasn't a nice feeling. It's this constant, almost like walking on eggshells, because I don't want to overshare how excited I am about things, or share about the things that light me up, because I'm afraid that it's almost like going to threaten you. And when I I suppose, like, I've always had people who really love me and support me and want to celebrate my success. But I think when I really started to see how valuable that was, and be around more people like that, also because that's something I value and want to be able to give to others, it, I think, is just something that motivates you and pushes you in a different way, and allows you to see great things within yourself that sometimes we might find a bit hard to see. Yeah, so, like, that's an important thing to have. You want people who want what's good for you, and who aren't afraid to celebrate you, who aren't afraid to celebrate your achievements. They're not there to compete with you. They're not there, to try and dim anything. They genuinely want you to do you. And I mean, yeah, I think that's a pretty awesome trait to have in people around you. And I guess one of the final things is people who have clear communication, and that's communication through good times, bad times, easy times, hard times. You want to be around people who, as I said, aren't afraid to hold you accountable, and that comes from good communication, and who can choose, kindness. So in the times when you might need, you might be going through a hard time, and need people around you who can really hear you and understand you, they're there. And I just, honestly, I can't believe how many incredible relationships I managed to form this year. And these green flags that I mentioned have shown up in all of these relationships, in both the new friendships formed as well as the friendships that have deepened. And I've just found that our level of communication has continued to improve. We're all able to be very open and honest and vulnerable. We're able to understand and really hear each other and validate our emotions and our feelings without getting caught up in it, without trying to fix and solve things. We're just able to hold space and to be there, and then to talk about the things that bother us, to talk about, even things that don't bother us, like just to be able to talk and communicate really clearly. And I've had a few hard discussions this year with some of my friends, and just being able to come out of that feeling closer and feeling the friendship strengthened has been a positive reminder to me of how important communication is in all relationships. So that's just something I really value, and I see it as a huge green flag. And overall for me, these green flags, what they ultimately allow is for you to be yourself, and it allows you to feel respected. And those are the two things I've come out of 2022 feeling. One is that I can fully be myself around these good humans. They really do love me and accept me as I am, but they're not afraid to hold me accountable. And regardless of my flaws, regardless of mistakes I might make along the way, I still feel very respected. And I hope, of course, that for them as well, having me in their lives, that they all feel like, obviously, that they can be themselves, and that there's always a deep level of respect and much more appreciation as well, of course. There's this idea of the proximity principle, which is you are, I think, one of. So the idea of the proximity principle is that you are the average of the 5 people closest to you. And when I've looked at different periods of my life and the person who I was at that time, perhaps different traits that were expressed more during a particular time, I've been able to see the influence that has come in because of the amount of time I've spent with people. And I can honestly say that 2022 has been the year where I've really chosen what that circle looks like, really chosen an average that I want to be, by surrounding myself with these ridiculously good humans. And I think, and I believe that we all have the capacity for kindness, both for ourselves and for others. We all have a choice in who we decide to invest time and energy in. And ultimately, we decide who will be in our sphere of influence. So my wish for you for 2023 is that you are also surrounded by your own good humans who allow you to be fully yourself and who love and accept you as you are, and who always ensure that you feel respected, but who aren't afraid to tell you the truth and hold you accountable when you need it. And to any of my good humans listening, thank you. I love you and deeply appreciate you. I would not have gotten through this year without you. So thank you, good humans. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow, subscribe, rate, review, hit all the buttons. I don't know. And you can also follow the podcast at self_podcast on Instagram. You can watch this podcast on YouTube, actually, if you're listening, you didn't know. And you can listen wherever you get your podcasts. I release new episodes every Thursday. Thanks again for tuning in. I will see you next week. Bye.